Hello, everybody, and welcome to Lisi's Ask Me Anything live stream on this lovely Friday in September. I hope everybody is having fun getting back to school and getting back to business. I'm Kristyn Brophy, Director of Client Strategy here at Lisi, and today I am joined by Robyn Addis, our COO and CMBDO extraordinaire. How are you today, Robyn?
Oh, it's okay. Everybody caught me dancing in the beginning.
It's all
Everybody
good.
caught me
I like
dancing in the music to the beginning. But you know what? I enjoy that music. And, sometimes you just need a dance to make your Friday better.
Yep. Oh, I totally feel you there. I
Yeah.
always dance to our live stream intro as well because it's good music, you know?
Yeah. Actually, I'll tell you a really quick funny story. So the other day I was in the car with Avery, my 3-year-old, and I was listening to one of our podcasts, and anytime the other person would say such and such, blah, 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 Robyn, my daughter would sit there and yell, "Answer her, mommy."
That's amazing.
So, yeah. So I guess, my daughter likes our live streams and podcasts too. We listen to them in the car.
Oh, good. That makes me feel a lot better. And it really is true, like how a podcast is like listening into someone's conversation. So someone was talking to you and she thought you were supposed to be answering.
Yeah, she thought I was
I
being
love
rude,
it.
I think is what happened.
Yep. That's okay. Well, anyway, today's Ask Me Anything is all about law firm marketing budgets. We are entering the end of Q3, going to be starting Q4 soon, and a lot of law firms are sharpening their pencils and working on their budgets for 2023. So super exciting. And we did get some questions in advance of this program that I'll walk through and whatnot, but to all of our listeners, feel free to drop a comment on the video. So if you have a question, we can be sure to get to it and answer it. And also feel free to say hi or just add your comments throughout. We really love that. We love participation from our audience.
Yeah, we're feeling a little bit punchy, both Kristyn and I today. So, just join in the fun.
Exactly. Yeah. It's been a long week. I feel like the short weeks are always the longest,
Yes, I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what do you got for me, Kristyn?
All right. So the first question that we received was, how much should law firms spend on marketing? That's a good one.
I love it. Yeah, I love this question, and I get asked this question a lot. So the benchmark for law firm marketing budgets is about 3 to 5% of gross annual revenue for B2B firms. That should be inclusive of salaries, that number. So if you're not including salaries in your marketing budget, it would be a little bit less. For consumer facing firms, your marketing budget should actually be 10 to 15% of your gross annual revenue. And that's because you're hopefully engaging in pay-per-click and paid advertising and other things that are expensive, but more money invested in some of those tactics, ideally, hopefully is yielding a better payoff on a contingency fee win or something like that.
Right. And it's more consumer based. So it's less word of mouth and professional networking with that B2C practice.
Exactly.
Yeah, I hear you. And so I guess, what does that 3 to 5% of that annual gross revenue look like? So what can you break that down into, or what types of categories should that be broken into other than the salaries that you were mentioning and such?
Yeah. So every firm is different. And how every firm builds their budget is a little bit different. I was at one firm where there was just a sort of gross budget, and maybe some practice groups or departments would put together some marketing budget dollars, that they would hold on to how their budget was broken down internally, but it was a little bit more loose. My last firm that I was at, it was very detailed down to specific activities, specific attendees for events and conferences, so on and so forth. So in terms of categories for things within that budget, you're going to want to make sure you account for marketing specific software expenses. If you have or are planning to purchase a client relationship management tool, a marketing automation tool, if you're, managing, if you have an experience management system, if you have a a proposal management system or a generation tool. So any of those marketing related software expenses. You might have certain things that are marketing specific that are owned by the IT department, but they charge back the cost of software to your department. So just make sure that you know how that works at your firm. I don't know if this was the case in my previous experience, but let's pretend that Adobe Creative Cloud was an expense that software was purchased by the IT department, and it is used by marketing, and it's used by attorney recruiting and advancement. So portions of that cost might be quote unquote charged back internally to that firm. So you have to account for that expense within your budget. Dues and subscriptions are a really important one, especially for marketing personnel. If they've got memberships to the Legal Marketing Association that the firm covers, the Association of Legal Administrators, ALA, or other professional associations. Also, dues and subscriptions might be, for the lawyers, might be a marketing expense. So if lawyers are members of professional bar associations or other marketing centric or business development centric organizations, those subscriptions might come on, or excuse me, those dues and memberships might come under the marketing heading. Publications and research is another big umbrella. Again, some of that might be covered by your library or your knowledge management function, but if you have an RFP monitoring service, if you've got a research service, any sort of knowledge management or KM tool, obviously your website, that's one that some firms that might be in IT, some firms that might be in marketing. Typically it's managed by marketing, in my experience, always in the marketing budget. So you want to make sure, not just for the website project, but for ongoing maintenance, enhancements, so on and so forth, any plugins or tools that you use on the website, marketing activities like legal directories and profiles, advertising, photography, events and equipment, and events has a whole universe of expenses under that as well. Yeah, I'm going to not go on and on about events, but events.
Oh yeah, those are expensive.
Yeah. And also too, you want to, this last two things I'll say is sponsorships for sure. And believe it or not, I really do believe events and travel and meetings are back despite COVID, despite a looming recession. I know I myself I'm really itching to get out and go to things again. I am itching to do business development face-to-face and network with people in person. So to the extent that that's safe and possible, we at least are going to be doing that. I don't think that we're unique. I think that everybody's sort of feeling that way. I do expect those to be back more fully. So there's those travel and meeting expenses, flights and meals and entertainment and all sorts of stuff like that.
And so this is interesting that you have all of these categories that you've listed out under the budget. And, oftentimes in law firms, marketing and business development are all roped into one. Do you think it's worth separating two separate budgets, one for marketing and one for business development?
I think it depends on how sophisticated your infrastructure is. I think in smaller firms, and I could be wrong, I think you have better insight into this based on some of the firms you were at prior to joining us here. But my impression is that in smaller firms, it's sort of like one large bucket, and there's like a little bit of a gray line between marketing and business development expenses. I've been at firms with marketing departments that are more than 50 people. And so those budgets, I often did argue for separating out the business development expenses because you want to be able to, there are certain things like marketing, which is, again, those broad things that are used either by the entire firm or by the entire department for marketing activities. And then those business development expenses against which you can calculate return on investment. Which client are we trying to entertain? Which client are we trying to acquire? How are we building those relationships? And here are all the activities that go into that expense. And, is that return on investment there? So it's easier. It's two different ways of calculating the worth of those expenses. What do you think? Like, what was your experience?
Yeah, so my experience was very similar. I've worked at an AmLaw 100 firm, an AmLaw 200 firm, and then I was in-house at a small boutique litigation firm. And it's very true. The marketing budget was very different. And the AmLaw 100 firm, we had marketing. We had marketing technology, we had business development, we had practice development, all sorts of different things that could fall under that main marketing umbrella, but it wasn't necessarily all marketing in, the most common sense of the word. But then the smaller the firm I worked at, the different the budget looked and the less segregated it was. So, my most recent firm that I was in-house at, the whole marketing budget was just one big bucket that I would just, separate out, like, okay, sponsorships, that's kind of business development. Each attorney had their own marketing budget depending on the size of their practice, their seniority level, that sort of thing. And they could use that marketing budget to whatever they wanted. It could be maybe a membership to an organization, or it could be, bringing clients out to lunch for networking or things like that. And they would come to, me for guidance of how should I use this small marketing budget I have? And then,
Yeah.
we had the obvious expenses of softwares and websites and special projects and things like that. And the tough part was always looking at the budget from the previous year and deciding, like, okay, how much did we spend on those budgets versus how much did we spend on, or how much should we spend in the coming year? And actually, we have a question from one of our viewers that relates to this. John Bologna, who, thank you so much for bringing up this question. How do you budget for unexpected opportunities that may arise? That is such a great question. Would you like to take that, Robyn?
Yeah, I'll take the first pass at this. So I'll tell you what we did at my past firm, which was very, very detailed and very, very specific down to every single event. We would budget a line item for contingencies. So we always said that just because a budget was approved doesn't mean the activity was approved. So again, that depends on how your firm works. But if we'd have all the activities as line items, and then we would have a contingency, which was maybe like about 10% of that practice group's marketing budget, just for those things that inevitably crop up. But we would also either overtly or covertly flag some of the things that we didn't know if they were actually going to be approved to happen once the time came. There might be things that were planned for the third quarter, and the approval to actually go forward with those marketing activities was contingent on marketing and business development work that was invested in the first half of the year. So there are also some things that you might be putting in as line items, but might be able to be fungible for other activities. How about you, Kristyn?
So my response to that is very similar to yours. I, obviously you want to build in that contingency, but another great item to kind of help you forecast, or a great thing to help you forecast what those contingent expenditures. Wow, I can't speak today. I apologize. But
it's Friday.
It's
okay.
It's Friday, but what might help forecast those contingent expenditures is collecting your data and running reports of what you have spent money on over the last year, 3 years, 5 years. Where have those unexpected expenses come from? Is it an unexpected sponsorship? Is it an unexpected event? Did your software break and you need to make an immediate change rather than, anticipating your changes? And by looking at the data and reporting from your tracking in the past, you can kind of help guide what your decisions will be in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm
thinking. Good one. Yeah, great question.
It really is a great question. Another question that has come through is, are there areas I can save money in my marketing budget?
Yeah, I mean, my answer to this is it's all about how you want to spend your money. And what I mean by that is, and I sort of touched on this when we were talking about the categories before. So let's take a experience management database. One way or another, firms need to have a way of understanding what their attorney's experience is, so that they can put it in pitches and proposals, that they can use it in RFP responses, so that they can use it on the firm website. So how are you capturing that information? Some firms, typically, what I've seen is a lot of firms start out with a really exciting spreadsheet and eventually that gets to be too much and overwhelming. That spreadsheet takes human capital in order to manage and maintain, as opposed to automation or processes for a more robust tool, of which there are a number out there in the marketplace right now. Obviously, those come with an expense. Weighing the expense of, does the time and salary of this person to aggregate and manage that content versus investing in a tool? What is sort of that time value of money? That's one way to think of it. I always recommend, in this sort of specific example, starting small and growing. So we talk about this
Mm,
with our clients a lot too. If you need a CRM tool, if you need a marketing automation tool or an email automation tool, we're not going to suggest that you dive into the one with the highest price tag and the best bells and whistles if you're starting out on an email campaign path for the first time ever. You need to figure out what works, figure out what doesn't, grow through a tool, which is likely going to be less expensive, and use that until you outgrow that service. So think about it. Not everything you purchase needs to um, be the best version day one. Which, as I'm saying this, I'm laughing a little bit to myself because I am an Apple product-aholic, and I
mhm.
always buy like the top level one. I don't need it. I don't need that top level one, but I always want the best one. So I'm telling you, don't do what I do. Buy the thing that you need today and grow into the next level.
Right, exactly. And depending on the size of your firm, the size of your marketing department, like who's going to be able to be using these tools and
Right,
using these softwares and such, maybe you don't want the most comprehensive one or top of the line one because maybe your strategy isn't enough to support the use of that. Maybe you just need something simpler. And we say to our clients all the time that we're technology agnostic, and that's how we guide them. We're just like, you know what, you don't need this. Like, yeah, you might want it, but do you really need it? Let's get you going with something else first and see where
right,
it goes from there.
right.
And technology is constantly changing.
Oh,
Marketing
for sure.
technology does not look the same today as it did yesterday, even.
Nope, not even a little bit. Don't even get me started about CRMs.
Oh my God, I know. They're constantly changing.
Yeah,
Another question that we received ahead of time was, can I just use the same budget as last year?
please
I'm
don't
going to
do
say
that.
no. Yeah.
Yeah, please don't do that. Um, so in all likelihood, if the answer to my counter question is yes, then yes, you can. Have you analyzed last year's budget and figured out that all the things that were in it were used effectively, were allocated the way that you expected? Did that budget like perform really well? And part two of that question, do you intend to basically do the same things this year? More likely than not, the answer to that question is going to be no. You probably had special projects in there that you budgeted for. You probably had things that you didn't get to. Or I mentioned this a minute ago, you might have budgeted for some things and deemed them not worthwhile when those activities actually came up within the calendar year. So
Hmm.
don't just use the same budget. It's a pain in the butt, but I really do recommend oh, there's a specific term for it that just flew out of my head, an accounting term for it, but starting from scratch and building it up from there, that would really do you better because it also gives you the opportunity to do what you said, Kristyn, before, which is really analyze what you've been doing, how you've been using those funds, especially year over year, um, in a way that makes the budgeting process ideally more efficient as you move forward.
Right. And we actually got another question that I think relates to this. How long does it take to develop a marketing budget? It depends. Just as, we've been saying all along, look at that data in the past and, starting from scratch, it's going to take a long time to really,
Yeah,
finesse and make sure that that budget looks like you want it to and is working the way it's supposed to be working. I mean,
yeah.
developing a marketing budget at one of my firms, it took 3 years to really get a set in stone kind of process for what developing that marketing budget is going to look like because you don't have enough data over just a couple of months. You need, I would
Hmm.
say, at least 6 months to a year of data to get started.
Hmm.
What do you
Yeah, and
think?
I would say, yeah, I mean, I agree with you on sort of an ongoing basis. I think in terms of, okay, if your fiscal year is on the calendar year, I really think you should be starting now. You should be um, when I was on the wow words, when I was the marketing operations manager at my previous firm and I first had responsibility for aggregating the budget, the first thing I did was look at those big ticket technologies, go to the technology owner, whoever the responsible person was, understand what their renewal costs were going to be, understand how long our contract was for. Um, Understand what potential discounts we would be able to gain if we did certain, manipulated certain aspects of our contract to our benefit, so on and so forth. Also, again, because my previous firm had a highly detailed process, it took a long time to get to aggregate, to start the process, to sort of get the process announced and launched, and aggregate the data from the various practice groups and departments and offices, et cetera. So nowish would be a great time to start, even if it's not that comprehensive of a process, because you don't want to be like the fourth quarter for any firm that runs on a fiscal calendar year. Fourth quarter is a nightmare between collections and all sorts of other things and just winding down the year. You will do well. Here's my pro tip: you would do well to make friends with the people in finance and accounting, because you are prepared with your budget ahead of time. I would say start as soon as possible. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely start as soon as possible. This is another good question. What if I disagree with some of the expenses that the firm puts in my marketing budget?
That's an interesting one. What if I disagree? Well, who has the final say on those expenses? And why do you disagree? I think so there's a few different ways to answer this question. So there's is it a shared expense owned by another department to which you're getting a slice of it? Is it an expense that like a practice group, department, or office put in that you don't think is worthwhile? I think it comes down to who has the final say. And in all cases, having the data, Kristyn said it, I say it, having the data to back up your logic and your reasoning. If the answer is somebody puts in, this is an example I used to use all the time. Okay, we've sponsored this table for 7 years. Pretend COVID didn't happen. We've sponsored this table for 7 years in a row. What have we actually gotten out of it? And if you are able to ask the question back to say, what have we gotten out of it? And you don't get a legitimately strong answer back that has, the ROI of that engagement or that activity, that's a good reason to maybe not do it. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I was just about to chime in with that same thing. Maybe they put sponsorships or, joining different organizations in your marketing budget, but you have 0 clients to show for it over the
Yeah.
last, 5 years. Running those profitability reports and finding a way to really track the return on your marketing investments is going to really help you in the long run, so that you can save money in some places and maybe spend more in other places that deserve more.
Yeah, I am going to throw in one caveat here so as not to alienate our lawyer friends. There
Yes.
are some, I don't have specifics in mind, but there are potentially some organizations that it is not unnoticed if we don't participate. So even though there
Yes.
might not be hard and fast data to point to about the return on that investment, it would not go unnoticed if we didn't participate, and therefore, by definition, we need to participate. I
Right.
don't think that excuse can be used all the time, but it is a real reason to make some investments.
Right. And I can use one of my previous firms, for example. My most recent firm, Concavana, we would spend a lot of money on Boston Bar Association sponsorships, which I think was wonderful. At first, I didn't see the real marketing value in it, but then I quickly learned, no, this is something that we need to be involved in. We're
Yeah,
lawyers. We have to be seen by the general public in Boston as Boston lawyers, and this is how we do it. And
yep,
that's definitely one of those real world examples.
for sure.
All righty. Let's see. Is PR and business development part of the marketing budget? I think so. I think we did cover that, but I think some firms do, depending on the size, kind of separate those buckets out a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's funny because these questions are bringing me back to a completely different time in my life when I had a different job. And I think the questions are totally understandable, because where I think they likely come from is you get a set number that you likely have to work with, right? Finance or the executive committee or whomever has decided that you get X. And if salaries and PR and BD and sponsorships and all of these things all come out of that pie, that leaves less money for you to be able to do those strategic projects that marketing typically wants to do. In my experience, marketing this is an oversimplification, but marketing was like a catch-all for a lot of those expenses, which really did limit our ability to do some strategic initiatives, which just forced us to be more resolute in our business case development for why we really needed to do certain things like redevelop the website or implement a new CRM or do things like that. Because the long-term business case, the business impact for the firm warranted us really considering an investment that was beyond what that sort of X initial number was. Funny story, if you see my camera moving, it's because my dogs are having a fight right here.
Oh no.
I
Yeah,
don't
I'm
know if you can
surprised I
hear it,
haven't
but
been
they're like
joined.
right here.
I'm surprised I haven't been joined yet by one of the cats.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, we're coming up on 25 minutes, a little over. So I know we usually like to keep these nice and concise for Friday afternoon. So I think we'll wrap up with this final question, which is a good one.
Yeah.
What is the business case for marketing when a recession is looming?
Oh yeah, I knew this question was coming. So it's a great question, and the sort of soft answer. It's not a data backed answer that I can give you, and then I have a little bit more data backed answer. Soft answer is if you're not marketing, I can guarantee that your competitor down the street is. And while
Hmm.
pockets, purse strings might tighten a little bit over the next months, maybe a year or so. The reality is that if you set yourself back now by not investing in marketing and staying top of mind, you're going to feel that impact towards the end of the recession, coming out of the recession. I mean, frankly, that is what we at least saw from our clients coming out of COVID. The firms that were really quick to jump on okay, here's an opportunity for us to up our game digital marketing wise. They came ready and raring, right at the beginning of the pandemic. And we still have firms that like 2.5, 3 years later are like, oh, we should probably be doing that. Same thing's going to happen going into and coming out of a recession. They're going to be first to sort of seize the opportunity in whatever way is appropriate and ahead of them. And some they're going to be slow and they're going to feel those repercussions long term. My slightly more data back to answer for that is to go back to what we've heard from Gartner and we've heard from Forbes and other places before. It takes 5 times more money, energy, etc., to retain new clients than it does to gain new clients than it does to retain existing clients. And marketing is part of retaining existing clients, but it's not just a volume play of that 5%, that effort. It's also you're retaining clients through the value that you provide. And that's what marketing really, truly, a law firm marketing department is there to help you do, is to provide value so that people want to work with you. Value can mean blogs and white papers and infographics and information and just thought leadership. That is like an added benefit to being a client of the firm and that you are putting out there to retain existing clients and also potentially to attract new clients. Do you agree, Kristyn?
Oh, I 100% agree. And, during a recession, if there is a little bit of a downturn with work, that is when you should be spending more time on writing blogs or doing case studies of previous cases and matters you've worked on and, publishing those case studies somewhere. Maybe this is when you can be recording webinars or pre-recording video content to be sprinkled out over the course of a couple months. So it's, make the best of a downturn, make the best of a recession, and utilize the resources that are available to you and invest in creating that content. And, similarly, as you said with your COVID example, don't get left behind because, all of us had to go remote. We all went virtual. All of a sudden, in-person events and in-person networking was no longer a thing. The firms who
Yeah.
leaned into the Zoom calls and digital happy hours and leaned into creating more content and leaned into social media, they were seen a lot more than the other firms. And that's how a lot of firms survived COVID.
Yeah. Agreed. Well, I know Kristyn, you said that was going to be the last question. So I'm just going to help you wrap it up because
Okay.
it has been one of those days and my dogs are fighting and I'm going to get them out of the house.
All right. Well, thank you so much for answering these questions and for joining me on today's live stream. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We will see you on our next one.
Thank you.